Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The long-awaited bidding documentation has been released for the first renewable energy projects. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss the tender process. Terence, welcome to Second Take. The bidding documents were released last week. Did they contain any surprises?
Well, I think the main element of surprise was the capacity number that was introduced. It's 3,725 megawatts. Now, originally we had all been talking about 1,025 megawatts. That was the number that was in the multi-year price determination that was discussed when Eskom applied for those large tariff increases between 2010 and 2013. And in fact, there was an element of the tariff that was set aside to pay for these renewable energy projects and the introduction of this first 1,000 or so megawatts. So the fact that it's been scaled up to 3,725 megawatts was, I think, a pleasant surprise for potential independent power producers in the renewable sector. And some of the figures are also interesting. For onshore wind, 1,850 megawatts has been set aside for procurement, 1,450 megawatts for solar photovoltaic solutions. So they're a big winner in this process, because it was felt that wind would dominate. So photovoltaic solutions, or PV, have also got a large chunk of this. 200 megawatts for concentrating solar thermal, 12.5 megawatts for both biomass and biogas, and then 25 megawatts for landfill gas, 75 megawatts for small hydro, and another 100 megawatts set aside for small IPP below 5 megawatts of capacity. So I think there's quite a lot to go around. So there were quite a few surprises in it, the capacity increase, and I think that was mostly a pleasant surprise.
Do you think the inclusion of price competition will affect the responses received to this process?
I think that's going to be interesting to see. You know, the renewable industry made there was quite an outcry in the run-up to this documentation being released. Well, the outcry was partly because, you know, we just had so many delays around this process. I think people were expecting the documentation to come out in around April. It's now, you know, August that the documentation came out. In fact, it came out on the 3rd of August at 6 o'clock. People were expecting it a bit earlier and had paid their deposits, but there was a computer glitch, so they could only get it from 6 o'clock. But now everyone has access to this documentation, and people are now mulling over their options. And but the anxiety was really about the abandonment of refit, and this was confirmed in the documentation. You know, there's going to be an element of price competition, as well as a whole lot of other selection criteria, which we have been alerting the market to. So it won't be purely on price. It won't even fit under the narrow framework of government's purchasing procurement framework, which really says 90% weighting towards price. It's less than 90% towards price, and it's quite complicated. All the other elements, the technical criteria that have to be met, the timelines that have to be met, as well as, you know, environmental, economic, localization, local content. There's a whole lot of other selection criteria within this mix, and it's going to be interesting to see how developers respond to this. I think there's a lot of, you know, work being done behind the scenes, and I think clarity will be sought, and some time has been set aside for the industry to get clarity from government and both the Department of Energy and the National Treasury in September. So I think, you know, while it's too early to say whether that's the abandonment of refit or the renewable energy feed-in tariffs will lead to some reticence, but I think on the whole there's a sense of also relief that at least there's some certainty around the tender process. At least there's some action at last.
How do you see the process unfolding from here?
Well, I think there will be a period of first coming to terms with what's in the documentation, looking at what can be bid, you know, in terms of the price, what is realistic to still make these projects bankable, because most of these projects will have an end element of bank finance or debt. Well, most of them, or if not all, will have debt financing. People also have to, if you're doing landfill gas and things like that, they have to set up PPPs with municipalities. So there's a lot of work that has to go in before a credible bid can be put before the Department of Energy and the National Treasury. And I think there has been some time. I understand on the 14th of September at 10 o'clock there will be some sort of meeting where I think some of these issues of clarity will be raised and maybe hopefully answered, or there'll be a period of, you know, trying to answer these areas of uncertainty. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how many megawatts are actually finally bid, whether that 20,000 megawatts of expressions of interest converts into a much larger and scaled up program in terms of 3,725 megawatts. We're going to have to wait and see. There is still an element of anxiety. People are concerned that it is going to lead to longer timeframes. But the government has made it clear they want these projects up and running by June 2014. So we need to start seeing these projects in the ground and work actually happening during the course of next year and the following year to make sure that that deadline is met. And then, of course, there's the whole element of local content. And I think that's been the main driver from a government perspective. Two drivers is not to repeat some of the mistakes that have happened in other jurisdictions where, the price of the feed-in tariff was at a point where they actually had to go back and renegotiate and get lower prices because they weren't considered sustainable. Government's particularly concerned about South Africa's power price path. We've already seen these massive tariff increases without the inclusion of renewable energy. And I think they're looking at ways to sort of soften the blow, not just from the coal, nuclear and all that side, but also from the renewable side. So the element of price competition has been brought in to try and sort of mitigate this high surging price path. And also we understand that a lot of work is going on behind the scenes ahead of COP17 to try and access some of these finance, these technology funds for the South African rollout of renewable energy to further mitigate this impact on the price, and also to scale up the program, because that's the other, I think, imperative, is to scale up the program to a point where manufacturers become interested in South Africa, not just as a destination for their products, but actually to build systems, manufacture systems in South Africa, not only for this local program, which is big, probably over 100 billion rand is going to be involved here, and there's more to come if you look at the integrated resource plan, but also for the region, which is also looking at renewable energy projects and potentially as an export platform into renewable programs in the rest of the world.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.